Welcome back to the Hive, bees.
We've got some more nerdy history stuff for you, and yes, it's about the Crusades.
From people going to war behind a goose,
and to enemies helping each other out.
All of this and so much more will be featured in today's video. I am one of your hosts, Brie Roome.
And I'm Raechel Fisher, and thanks for getting stoked about this request, because I'm excited. So let's get weird.
Woo! At number 10, Holy Goose. Yeah. Back in the days of old, there were a lot of people in Europe who felt the need to participate in the Crusades. There was a wide array of reasons as to why an individual would want to join in on this quest, and there were a lot of motivators for people as well. Though many people participated in these conquests by order of whatever ruler sent them on their way, others found different justifications, and one of the leaders for this quest was a goose. A holy goose. In 1096, the People's Crusade, unsanctioned by the Pope, took place, and a handful of people went there following a goose that they believed was some kind of divine being. The story here goes that there was a woman who was being trailed by one of her geese, and through miscommunication and misunderstanding, some started to believe that this goose was actually leading them, not following them. Today, scholars can't grasp how ridiculous this was for people to actually believe that this bird was leading them on a holy quest, especially since back in those days, people thought that animals didn't have souls and were therefore unable to grasp the concept of divinity anyway. These people were so obsessed with this goose that they even allowed it to enter a church, which was also considered blasphemous at the time.
Alright, number 9, Pickled. Just like the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie, the first Crusade was the only successful one. Well, successful by Christian terms. They killed a lot of innocent people. Legend has it that when the Christians took Jerusalem, the blood in the streets was like a foot deep. It was awful. But of course, the Christians couldn't help but reboot the whole affair. When Saladin took Jerusalem back, this sparked the Third Crusade. One such emperor, Frederick Barbarossa, was a fierce leader, and even though he was 67 years old, Saladin was wary of his arrival. But he never got there. While crossing Turkey, the great leader fell off his horse into a river, and the weight of his armor caused him to drown. His death dissipated his massive army, and some historians believe that should the German emperor have made it, the Third Crusades would have been more successful. But some of Frederick's followers were so loyal and heartbroken at the loss of their ruler that they tried to pickle his body. But it didn't work though, and his remains were then instead interred in several cathedrals on the way home.
At number 8, Divine Intervention. I'm sure you're somewhat familiar with the idea of divine intervention, the notion that some kind of religious or cosmic force intervenes in your life for some kind of purpose. Well, according to some stories, there was allegedly a case of divine intervention during the Crusades that helped them find a religious artifact. In one of the strangest events of the Crusades, a low-ranking French peasant named Peter Bartholomew had St. Andrew appear before him, and he seemingly revealed the location of the Holy Lance, a spear that was, quote, believed to be a spear that was used by Roman soldiers to pierce Jesus' side at the crucifixion. Now you can imagine that if this peasant man went up to someone in a higher rank back then and told them that they were visited by a saint and told them where to find the Holy Lance, they would probably be a tad bit skeptical. But they still took a chance on him, and wouldn't you know, they actually found the religious artifact. People were still a little confused as to how Bartholomew knew exactly where to find it, and so a little later on, he tried to prove himself through trial by fire. But as you can imagine, that did not really work out in his favor. He ended up badly burned and passed away shortly after.
Number 7, the Crusades, but for kids. So contagious was the idea of the Crusades that they even made a boys and girls club all about it. Different times, folks. Different times. 12-year-old Stephen of Cloyes began the pursuit with tens of thousands of children in his wake, ready to fight the Holy War. Of course, the King of France and the Pope gave him one look and were like, "No, go home." But they persisted. Stephen had a divine vision and preached to whomever would listen, and he was really good at promoting hysteria. A similar thing happened in Germany, led by a boy named Nicholas of Cologne. They were unarmed and optimistic that they could take back the Holy Land. Though of course both uprisings were absolute failures. The herd of mini crusaders got as far as Italy, then language barriers, hunger, and exhaustion became too big an obstacle to overcome. Stephen did get an audience with Philip of France, but that was about as far as they got. Some historians wager whether it was this fantastic tale that inspired the story of the Pied Piper.
At number 6, Meteor Shower. Before anyone really understood anything about astronomy, people believed that things like meteor showers and eclipses were signs from the gods. This was so heavily believed by the Crusaders that it actually had a big influence on their conquests. Back during the 11th century, the Crusaders interpreted these big space events as omens. Seeing a meteor or a comet was seen as a good omen, and having a lunar eclipse was also interpreted as God endorsing their holy war. He really said, thumbs up guys, go ahead. Some were a little more intense with their interpretations and saw these events as signs of the end of the world, and this actually sort of lines up with the timeline of some of the Crusades. It tied in with the First Crusade, as after witnessing a meteor shower, Pope Urban II declared a holy war. Some see this as the church's way of claiming as much religious ground as possible before the end times.
Speaking of the stars foretelling misfortunes, something weird happened during the Third Crusade. Shortly after Richard arrived towards the end of June, an eclipse plunged the battlefield into darkness. It lasted for 3 hours and unsettled the Christian crew because of obvious reasons, because Brie mentioned, you know. It also creepily coincided with the nativity of St. John the Baptist and matched up with a wave of illness that swept over. Richard developed a high fever, his hair started falling out, and his teeth and gums became sore and inflamed. Turns out the great king got a fierce bout of scurvy, which after a long ship voyage wasn't uncommon. But for the king to succumb to such terrible sickness right after the ominous event rendered his army nervous. At the time, Richard and Saladin were still in negotiations, which soon turned sour after miscommunications from his envoys. Richard was still ill when the battle began, and his friend King Philip decided to attack the Cursed Tower. Richard still joined in even with his illness. James Rustin Jr. writes, from the top of the Matt Griffin, he was reclined like back in a chair with a crossbow with like its teeth falling out, picking off enemies.
At number 4, eating grass. As was mentioned before, there were a lot of reasons why people joined the Crusades. Some did it for glory and money, others did it because they were asked to, and others did it for the sake of their beliefs. For those who wanted to join the Crusades solely for their religion, some believed that fighting in these wars was the absolute immersion into their religion, and they took it pretty seriously. These people were called the Taffers, and they were known for taking the Crusades very seriously. They took strict vows of poverty, they wore ragged clothing, got rid of all of their weapons, and they even ate grass and roots to survive. And no, we're not talking about wheatgrass shots that you get at Booster Juice. We're talking about barnyard animal grazing energy from these people. These people leaned heavily into filth and destitution for the cause. The Taffers also made a name for themselves thanks to their ruthlessness and plundering in war, even creeping out some of the other Crusaders. They were really serious about their cause, and it really showed that these people were built different.
Speaking of grass, kind of, number 3, the origin of assassins. Assassins played a huge role in the Crusades, albeit undercover. Most documentation that exists around these mysterious and skilled assassins comes from the accounts of their enemies. But did you know that the term assassins has a relationship to the term hashish, an extract of cannabis? Neither did I until I started reading about the Crusades. An old man named Sinan led this group of Ismailite assassins and was known to the Christians as the Old Man of the Mountain. Sinan was brilliant, deceitful, mystical, ruthless, and created a league of assassins so powerful, even the mention of their name made both Christian and Muslim sides quiver with fear. But in order to be indoctrinated into the group, the young men ingested a potion laced with cannabis, which transported them to paradise. They would then be handed a dagger and given their assignment. They became known as the Hashashins, which would give rise to the modern term assassin.
At number 2, bear fight. You know how sometimes when you're playing a video game and you're following the main story, but then you decide to put that on the back burner for a while and complete a side quest? Well, this next bizarre Crusader story feels a lot like that. There once lived a man named Godfrey of Bouillon who gained notoriety because he just decided to fight a bear just cuz. He was known as a brave and noble crusader, and he was very strong. One day he was just out and about traveling to who knows where when he came across a peasant who was getting attacked by a bear. Rather than just continue on his way and let things between the peasant and the bear play out, he decided to intervene, and so while on horseback, wielding his sword, he attacked the bear. The bear murked the horse, but he could not defeat Godfrey, and the brave knight emerged victorious. No one really knows why Godfrey decided to throw hands with the bear that day. All we know is that he did it and somehow survived. He later became the ruler of Jerusalem before his death in 11 BC.
And last but not least, Saladin versus Richard. If Richard and Saladin weren't at war with each other, they probably would have been best friends. When Richard first arrived to the Holy Land and was preparing to take Acre, he was greeted by not arrows, but gifts from Saladin. A basket of pears, Damascene plums, and fruits in a gesture of peace. Richard, curious, sent an envoy to request a meeting in person with the ruler, but he refused. Saladin's belief was that should two kings meet, then it was not seemly for them to make war. In between battles and disagreements, the kings would continue to exchange gifts for some reason. For instance, as previously mentioned in another video, Saladin at one time rescued the king. During the Battle of Jaffa, which was I think the last one, King Richard fought so ferociously that Saladin couldn't help but be mad impressed. He was like, this guy's such a badass. He had lost his horse but continued to fight tirelessly, killing Saladin's men, and Saladin was like, this guy can't fight on foot. Send him 2 more horses. Yeah, so the guy in the middle of the battle just sent him 2 horses because he was like, this guy's amazing. The Third Crusade essentially ended in a stalemate with the 2 rulers being so well matched, but they never met, even after the fighting was over.
People do go to war over some really strange things.
Yep, they do.
But we made a video about it, so if you want to show some love, smash that like button and subscribe. You know, do the thing.
Yeah, let us know in the comments what historical things you want to talk about next.
Yeah. Anyways, I've been one of your hosts, Brie Roome.
I've been your host, Raechel Fisher, and until next time,
Stay sweet, bees.